On Ellie, fear eats the soul, and my name is not Ellie. Rainer Werner Fassbender, 1974, and Viola Shafik, 2011. I consider Ellie, Fear Eats the Soul to be the masterpiece of the iconic German filmmaker Rainer Werner Fassbender. In the movie, Fassbender confronts the taboos of a conservative German society with a story of race, migration, class, and intergenerational love. Ali, played by Al-Hadi bin Salim, a newly arrived Moroccan, handsome, dark, young, steps into a ballroom bar and meets a woman. The mise en scène is how one might imagine the remnants of the Weimar Republic, burlesque Berlin, trappings now occupied by lonely and poor working class workers. Ali notices a woman in her 60s, Amy, played by Brigitte Mira, nursing a drink. He walks up and asks her to dance. The sex scene is brief, with narrow, awkward angles revealing the uneasiness of both sides, and yet the relationship evolves into a precarious mismatch that persists. The hardship and angst manifest in Ali are expressed in the famous German title, Angst essen Seele auf. Fear eats the soul, words that sound like the remain of a Stoic or Nietzschean maxim. Amy, who works as a cleaner, is seduced by Ali's beauty and youth. She is wise and realistic. The words of the title are her own, spoken to Ali when his life seems bleak. Later, when Ali's sadness turns into a physical illness, Amy's words seem again to summarize Fassbender's solidarity with the classless society and his own advocacy of sexual liberation rooted in love. These people, she says, come here and experience hardship, and then they die young. However, this hardship does not end with this film or the death of Ali. The angst carries on away from the screen and deep into another generation. Viola Shafiq's documentary, My Name is Not Ali, shifts the paradigm as it focuses on the reality of Al-Hadi bin Salim's life, notably through the lives of his two sons. During filming, the children were flown from Morocco to Germany by their father, without the mother's consent, and to her deep and lasting anguish. Fassbender and his entourage courted Al-Hadi bin Salim into an alcohol-fueled existence, sexual escapades, and hard drugs, which led to Salim's utterly abandoning his children. In a foreign land without any money, unable to speak German, the children went hungry. One of the boys was sent back home. The remaining son was dragged from one party to the next and subjugated to neglect and finally isolation. These were the circumstances of his formative years. The consequence of that brutal displacement and neglect accompanied him all his life. Much like the character his father played, he lived firsthand the experience of a newcomer to this society, where desire for belonging is met with neglect and marginalization, and solitude is besieged by the noises of liberation, political idealism, and certainly success. Ali, Fear Eats the Soul, is monumental. But all monuments hide the brutality of sweat, slavery, and exploitation. This is the untold story of this masterpiece, and it's not an exception.
On Underground by Mir Costa Rica, written by David Bezmozgis. In April of 2020, a friend called me from Los Angeles to tell me that Chris had killed himself. Someone had found him in his Venice apartment. We had all gone to film school together in the late 1990s, I somewhat incidentally, the others more intentionally. Chris was from working-class Palo Alto, darkly handsome, a talented muralist of Polish and Italian lineage, the oldest of two brothers. Film school in Los Angeles don't tend to be cradles of virtue, but I don't remember Chris ever being petty or cruel. The spring before we started film school, Emir Kusturica, the Bosnian-Serbian director, won the Palme d'Or at Cannes for his film Underground, a great, raucous, 3-hour saga that tracked from the opening salvos of World War II in the Balkans to the Bosnian War, that obliterated even the concept of Yugoslavia. Costa Rica previously made Time of the Gypsies and followed with Black Cat, White Cat, films that were so lush, kinetic, and narratively outrageous that they teased the line between a faithful representation of reality, repudiating sanitized and formulaic Hollywood, and an incorrigible embrace of the absurd. I remember those films as revelations, works of art that showed what was possible. Chris loved Underground in particular. Hoping to evoke his presence, I rewatched the film recently. I hadn't seen it in 25 years. The story is a love triangle between two friends, Marco and Blackie, grifters who've allied with Tito's communist resistance, and Natalia, the star of the Belgrade stage. At first, Marco and Blackie seem practically indistinguishable from each other, but when Marco usurps Natalia from Blackie, he reveals himself to be duplicitous in a way Blackie is not. Marco orchestrates an elaborate ruse to convince Blackie and others hiding from the Nazis that the war isn't over. They live for 20 years in a cellar, manufacturing arms for the resistance and awaiting orders to emerge and liberate their country. Meanwhile, Marco becomes a hero of the Tito regime, celebrated for his socialist realist doggerel. If history is either tragedy or farce, Costa Rica chooses farce without denying the tragedy. Terrible things happen, people are tortured and killed, or die of illness, mishap, or by their own hand. But Costa Rica is a master of tone and keeps the film mostly buoyant. The action is slapstick. A brass band provides frenzied accompaniment for scenes of banquet and battle. Like a great writer who seizes an opportunity in every sentence, Costa Rica fills each frame with something bold and emotionally arresting. The hero of the film is ultimately Blackie, since he personifies its spirit. Though he suffers betrayal, disappointment, and loss, he succumbs to neither cynicism nor despair. I saw Chris in Blackie, and not just because he physically resembled the actor who played the part. They shared qualities of exuberance, generosity, and charisma. Or that is how I remembered Chris. I hadn't seen or spoken to him in 2 years before he died. Another friend learned that a failed business venture had obliged him to sell his grandfather's farm, that a childhood ailment had come back to plague him, and that he had been hospitalized in a psychiatric ward for a time. And yet, my naive response to seeing the film was that if Chris had only watched it again, it could have banished the darkness and kept him alive. If this is a fantasy, it's a fantasy shared by the film itself. Underground concludes by doing something that only film can, bringing the dead back to life. The final scene is another banquet. The brass band plays. All of Blackie's departed relatives and friends are at the table. All is forgiven but not forgotten, Blackie tells Marco and Natalia, as the grassy promontory on which they are perched breaks away and drifts out to sea.
Hi, my name is Madeleine Thien, and I'm so thrilled and honored to be part of the Brick 108 launch. I'll be reading a piece called On West of the Tracks about the filmmaker Wang Bing, and it's part of the On Film section of this issue of Brick. West of the Tracks, Wang Bing's 9-hour documentary trilogy was filmed with a handheld digital video camera between 1999 and 2001. The three parts of the film, remnants and rails unfold in Tiesie district in Shenyang, part of China's industrial heartland in the northeast. Men, women, and children denounced for political crimes between the 1950s and the 1980s work in smelters, machine factories, mines, and arsenals, as do former convicts, alleged delinquents, professors, doctors, and migrant workers. They argue, fall in love, invent, play, banter, worry, devise. Over the course of filming, as state-owned factories close, these workers are deemed redundant. Salaries go unpaid, and the whole infrastructure of worker life is demolished. A community of the uprooted is once more fed into a system of radical transformation. Wang Bing's camera feels like a person, crouched on the ground, smoking a cigarette. It sits off to the side, next to steel rope or trousers for sale. It hangs out near the communal telephone or crowds onto a bed with giddy teenagers. The faces it sees are in repose, but only apparently so. The face of a boy reveals universes as he is teased, insulted, and threatened. We see a calm exterior, a sense of injury, appreciation of the absurd, conformity in the guise of jocularity, vengeance waiting for an opening, rebellion. In the second part of the trilogy, an older man sells the entire contents of his house to an ungrateful buyer. As soon as the deal is done, he stares at the camera in despair. He has sold his life to an insolent boy. Once you agree to move, the man tells Wang Bing, you lose any leverage you have, and there's no more negotiating. Around him, homes are turned inside out. His neighbors break down their tables, chairs, and finally their walls in an effort to get a bit of cash for what remains. In the background are abandoned factories and roofs pulled open to salvage metal. A bouquet of flowers is regifted to various love interests. There's no pity. There's ingenuity, mourning, and defiance, as this neighborhood, where so many fates were stirred together, ceases to exist. West of the tracks watches a disappearing time, but inverts it into something ferociously tangible. Things, factories, homes, dictators, and ideologies fall, but the people, it's not that they survive, but that their complexity defies language. They look into the camera as into the face of a friend or a window only they can see. West of the tracks feels as much a remnant of the future as of the past. One senses with Wang Bing's 16 films that his subjects are always with him, that he has faith in them, and that he too has been faithful. His chronicle of modern China survives in countless copies of copies of copies, passed from friend to friend, always with an astonished, grateful question. Have you seen this? And these are my copies of copies of copies, and some more Wang Bing copies given to me by friends. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. I so hope you enjoy the new issue.